Hello everyone! I'm Miss Kate, a Youth Services Librarian at the Jersey City Free Public Library, and today we're going to be baking red velvet cupcakes, as you might read about in the book Husky by Justin Sayre. Justin Sayre will be one of our authors that will be coming to talk to us, and I'm so excited to have him. He's written the trilogy Husky, Pretty, and Mean, and he writes a lot for YA, and in this trilogy he talks about how people label each other and why that's not always, well, we all know that that's not really a good thing. So he writes about 3 different experiences by being labeled by just one word: Husky in the book Husky, Mean in the book Mean, and Pretty in the book Pretty. And you might not know Justin Sayre's name, but I am sure you know his work because he has written for shows like Two Broke Girls, The Cool Kids, and he's also an actor. He's been on Lisa Kudrow's The Comeback, and he does lots of theater. He spends his time between New York and LA, so you might have seen him in our neighborhood at some point in New York, and he writes in his stories, they take place in Brooklyn. I cannot say how excited I am for him to come speak with us. But for now, let's celebrate his books. So the first thing that we're gonna do is go get our ingredients together so that we can start baking these hopefully delicious red velvet cupcakes. So let's go get our ingredients all together. So the recipe that we're going to be using is from sallysbakingaddiction.com with the red velvet cupcakes. And there's lots of pictures, but to find the ingredients and the recipe, we're gonna scroll down. And see the description. So here we see our ingredients, and then we have the instructions. And then there's also some notes, some pro tips about the recipe and other related recipes. But we are just going to start off with the ingredients. So I'm going to go gather those and let's get started. So actually, before we get started, I like to make sure that I set aside the things that need to be at room temperature. So if you read the instructions, you see that the buttermilk, half cup buttermilk, needs to be at room temperature. So I'm going to pour that and set that aside so that it can start warming up, and then I can put the rest of the buttermilk back into the fridge. All right, so we have that setting aside. The next thing that needs to be at room temperature is the butter. So this also is going to be a 1/4 cup, and if you look at the measurements, you'll see that half a stick of butter is a 1/4 cup. So I'm going to open the butter, and now I'm going to cut it in half and let half of the stick of butter sit at room temperature, and then I can put the other stick of butter back into the refrigerator. And now the final thing that needs to be room temperature are 2 eggs. So I'm gonna set these aside and wait a few moments so that they get to room temperature. Now let's go preheat the oven. So our ingredients are ready to go. And before we get started, we're gonna preheat the oven to 350 degrees. So as I've mentioned in other videos, my family, we always put things in the oven, pans and things. So I still just always check that there's nothing in there, and then I will preset the oven to 350 degrees. All right, so now while it's preheating, the instructions say that we should start lining our cupcake holders, so let's go do that. All right, we have our cupcake pans and our liners, so I'm gonna take them out. Now the ingredients, or the instructions say that the ingredients will make 14 cupcakes. That's very precise. We might not be as precise as Sally's Baking Addiction, but and make sure that you don't waste any. All right, for the next part, we're going to need to separate our eggs once they get to room temperature. So feel them. If they're still a little chilly in your hands, maybe just wait a little bit longer. But once they're ready to go, you're gonna separate them. So I'm not a pro at this. Let's see if I can do it. So I'm gonna gently crack the egg and gently pull it apart. I'm gonna let the egg white go into this bowl because this is what I want to mix. So I'm gonna try to separate the egg white and go back and forth there. And now put the yolk aside. And then let's try it again. All right, so I'm gonna separate it. Let the white part fall away. There we go. And then put the yolk over here. So that might not be the best, but that's the best that I'm gonna do. So we're gonna set this aside for a later part of the recipe. And now we're going to whisk the egg whites until they're foamy and frothy. If you have an electric mixer, then that's the easiest way, but I do not have an electric mixer. So I'm gonna hand whisk this for 2 or 3 minutes until it's all foamy. All right, finally got some soft peaks. Right, so now it says that we're going to sift the flour and the cornstarch. So we'll start with the first cup of flour. So this is my sifter. It equals a cup. I'm gonna put the top on. And then I'm just gonna sift out all of the flour. All right, so now we're going to add a 1/3 cup of flour. So this is a 1/3 cup. Now I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of cornstarch. Okay. And then we continue sifting. Now that we're done sifting it, we're going to whisk it all together to try to make sure that the cornstarch and the flour are evenly distributed. So I'm gonna whisk it. And then once you've mixed all of the flour and cornstarch together, we're going to add the baking soda, the cocoa powder, and the salt and set it aside. First, we're going to add half a teaspoon of baking soda. So I don't have little measuring spoons. If you do, that's better. But if you look into your utensil drawer, you'll see 2 different sizes of spoons. The smaller spoon is the teaspoon. So I'm going to eyeball half a teaspoon of baking soda. All right. So hopefully that's half a teaspoon of baking soda. And then I need 4 teaspoons of cocoa powder. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then finally a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And then we're gonna whisk that all together and blend it evenly. All right, so we're gonna set this aside. All right, now it says that we need to beat the butter on high speed until smooth and creamy, but I don't have an electric mixer. So I'm gonna try to beat it myself with a fork. Now, if it was a bit more room temperature, I think it would be a lot easier. This has probably been sitting out for about 45 minutes. So if you watch this before you get started, maybe let yours sit out for an hour or two. It would probably be much easier and creamier. All right, so you can see that it's pretty smooth and creamy, probably the best that I can get it with my hands mixing. So now, sorry if you hear my friend's dog in the background. Now I'm going to add 1 cup of sugar. All right. And mix that in until creamed together fairly well. Okay, so now I think I've mixed it up probably as best I can with my hand. So now I'm going to add the oil. Now I only have 1 measuring cup that's half a cup, and it's filled with buttermilk right now. So I'm going to use 2 quarter cups because 1/4 plus 1/4 equals 1/2. So I'm gonna add 1, 2. All right, so it says beat for about 2 minutes, and it says the butter may look piecey and not completely combined with the oil. This is normal and okay. So I think we're good to go. I'm gonna set this aside and now go get the egg yolks and some vanilla. Okay, so now we have our 2 egg yolks from when we separated the eggs before. Remember that when you compare the 2 spoons that you'll probably find in your utensil drawer, the smaller is a teaspoon, and we're gonna add 2 teaspoons of vanilla. 1, 2. And now we're going to mix them until they're combined. So this looks like they're pretty combined to me. So now I'm going to add some of the white vinegar. Well, not some, all of it. So we're going to do 1/2 teaspoon of the vinegar. Mix it in. And then we're going to add the food coloring. Now, you can add as much as you like. Sally'sBakingAddiction.com recommends 2 teaspoons. So I'm gonna go with that recommendation. So I'm gonna do 1, 2. And there was a lot left on the spoon, so I'm just gonna use the spoon. Once it's all mixed up, you can decide, is that as much as you want? You could go a little darker and add more if you want, but I'm pretty happy with this. Right, so now we're ready to mix it all. So we're gonna gather up all of our bowls. So you'll see we have our buttermilk, our butter oil sugar, our frothy egg whites, and our dry mix. So and then our food coloring and flavor. So I'm gonna put this in first. So I messed up. These should have been combined already. You can tell that I don't often cook. So any of these recipes, take with a grain of salt that I might be telling you the wrong thing to do. But practice is the only way to get better, and I'm willing to practice. All right, so we have our egg yolk and butter and oil. I'm gonna mix them all together. And this is what we're gonna start with. So again, you can see, is this the color that you want it to be? It might get a little darker when we add the cocoa dry mix because of the brown in there, but we'll see. All right. So sorry about that. Now we have this and we're going to add, so I think according to the recipe, we're gonna add a third of this, then half of the buttermilk, a third of this, half the buttermilk, and then the last bit of the dry mixture. So I'm gonna add a third of the dry mix, and we're gonna mix it together until it's all mixed up. So scraping the edges to make sure there's no dry bits, good. Now I'm going to add about half of the buttermilk. Okay, and mix that all in. Now again, I'm gonna add about half of what's left in here. Mix that up. You see I'm scraping the edges to make sure all the dry mix gets mixed into the batter. All right. Now I'm going to add the rest of the buttermilk. And then finally, the rest of the dry ingredients. And I think we're ready for the next stage. All right, now that we have the base of the batter ready, we can fold in the frothy egg whites. So I feel like I might have taken too long because these egg whites are a bit foamy now instead of frothy. So we'll try. So it says that you should just use a wooden spoon. Or a rubber spatula, but I like wood better. All right, so it says that once this is done, the batter should be smooth and silky. It is starting to look smooth and silky to me. Right. Now I don't want to over mix it. So now that everything is blended, I think we're ready to put these in the cupcake liners. So let me go get those. So it says that we should spoon in the batter and fill each cupcake liner to halfway or 2/3. So I'm gonna go 2/3 because I want big cupcakes. But you can decide. If you want to make it for more people, then you can make them smaller so you get more. And now that our cupcakes are ready to go, we put them in the oven. Okay, I'm gonna set the timer for 20 minutes, and while those are baking, we can clean up. All right, the alarm just went off, so I'm going to take out the cupcakes. We're going to use our old tried and true trick. I don't have toothpicks, but I have skewers, so let's see. Clean. So these are ready. I'm going to go get the others and let them cool. And once you know your cupcakes are done, don't forget to turn off the oven. Now the cupcakes have cooled and we can ice. So for this one, I just bought cream cheese frosting. So you can just smooth it on. And I always say this is a nice thing to do with friends, or if you can't have friends over, with people that you're living with, and you can chat. Maybe you want to chat about something that you're reading in the book Husky by Justin Sayre. He talks a lot about having issues with friends and figuring out who you are, and sometimes it's good to talk about those things. So you can either put the icing on with a knife like I was, or if you want to be a little fancy, you can do a frosting bag. I always like to just stick my hand in there and scoop it out. Just make sure you keep it inside the bag. And then I'm gonna go grab some scissors. I got my scissors, and I'm just gonna take a little bit off the end of the bag. All right. And then you can do some fun designs if you're skilled at that. I am not, so I'm just gonna, you know, practice makes perfect. So we'll just keep practicing.
Viviamo negli eti conici che la bellezza